You're listening to Brave Girls with Tracy M, where we choose to empower you to be a better leader, mentor, and coach in the world. We'll share stories of people who have achieved great heights by overcoming adversity and rising to the challenge, all while pursuing their passions. These courageous people will inspire you to have faith in yourself and take bold action. Right here with the host of Brave Girls, Tracy M.
Episode 38, Take a Down Day with Resia Nank. On this episode, meet my former work colleague, Resia Nank, and listen to her brave girl story and about how she climbed the corporate ladder at major corporations in healthcare, banking, and more. We talk about her career in public relations, investor relations, employee communications, and managing leadership events, and what she really liked about her work. She talks about her adrenal health crisis and what it taught her about herself, her perfectionistic tendencies, and how she has now healed herself. She shares the techniques she used and how she rebuilt her adrenal capacity. With her entire identity wrapped up in her job, she was lost and now takes days as a freelancer where she takes a down day. Her book, Small Town Scandal, A Real-Life Love Lesson, is the true story of her being seduced by a married man twice her age when she lived on Maryland's Eastern Shore in the 70s. She shares the details on the show and how scandal rocked her small town and her world. She also talks about her self-publishing path and how she's used her public relations skills to promote the book and why she's worried about and what she worried about in terms of being sued when she wrote the book. She's also written a children's book, Kitty Girl and Mr. Squirrel, that's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. She's planning to write a sequel and has plans to write a true crime book, so be on the lookout. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Resia, and remember always to take a down day to rest and don't push too hard. So let's meet Resia. So welcome to Brave Girls with Tracy M. I'm so excited because today I have Resia Nank, who is a former colleague of mine from back in the day, very established, accomplished PR and communications pro, and recently published author and now entrepreneur. So welcome to the show, Resia.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I'm talking to you, and you're based in Scottsdale, Arizona, but also have your roots here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Baltimore, but also lived in Chicago and Mobile, Alabama, getting ready to move back to Chicago. So tell us more about how you got started in PR and communications. You must have always been a writer.
Yeah, I wrote quite a bit in school. I kept a journal, and I had a really good English teacher. Shout out to Mrs. Jennings in like my junior year of high school, who I don't think I could have gotten through college courses without her. She was very tough on us, which was great. It made me a better person. Just excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thought I got it, but maybe I didn't. Okay. So shout out to Mrs. Jennings. She got me through college. I did a lot of writing in college. I actually had an internship that turned into a job. My senior year of high school, the local newspaper, they had a school page section. And so they chose me out of the journalism class in high school to edit the school page section in my senior year. So I was writing a lot of stories about all the different things that went around the high schools in the counties around us, and writing the headlines and doing the old-fashioned layout where you used to run the pages through the hot wax and use the X-Acto knife. And, you know, it sounds so antiquated now because everything's computer, but I learned everything. I did every job at the Star Democrat in Easton. Every job they would let me do, I did. I worked in advertising. I worked in circulation. I was the first person to use the first computer that they ever got there. They sat me down and said, here's this weird thing. We want to do the classifieds on it so we can update them easily. You figure it out. You're the kid. You know?
Right.
So I did, and it was fun. It was great. So from there, I went to college, and I was planning on being a I wanted to be a newscaster on TV. And so realizing that was really hard and, competitive. And also I fought so hard. I went to Towson, so I left the Eastern Shore. I went to Baltimore, to the big city. And I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back to a small market and to be, to work your way up in those days, to be on a major network like in Baltimore, you had to go back to Hagerstown or Salisbury or some smaller market and prove yourself and work your way up. And I just did not want to do that. I thought, well, I have fought so hard to get off the Eastern Shore and get here. I don't want to go back. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And another shout out to an old colleague, Bill Amelia. He has his own PR firm in Baltimore, and he was my PR teacher. He was one of my teachers in elective I took in Towson, and he said, you should be in PR. He says, you're really good. You talk, you write really well. You're a good talker. You should be in PR. And I had really no idea what that was. So he's like, what are you doing now? So I actually had been in a play with a lady who was the director of major medical at Blue Cross. And she had gotten me a job, and I was just doing clerical work while I was in school, working for her. And she let me work whenever I wanted to, basically. They always had piles and piles of claims, so there was tons of work to do. So I told him that. He goes, I have an in for you. He goes, I used to be the VP of Public Affairs at Blue Cross. And he goes, and I know the guy that has the job now because I got it for him.
Wow.
So I said, well, that's great. I could use an internship. No problem. So he got me an interview with Nick Greaves, rest his soul. He's deceased now. But I went there with my little briefcase and my one and only dress that I owned. And I walked in, and here's this guy smoking a cigar. Now, that was back in the day when that was okay. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't work for this man. He's smoking a cigar. But we had a great interview, and he was really appreciative of all the work I did at the newspaper. Mm-hmm. So he said, listen, he said, I know you want an internship, and I'm happy to give you a grade, but my secretary's leaving. And I need somebody to do my filing, answer the phone, do some typing, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, I'm not the fastest typist in the world, and I don't take shorthand, but I certainly will do whatever you ask me to do. And he goes, shorthand, don't worry about it. I write everything out longhand on yellow pads anyway. He goes, I'm not worried about that. And next thing you know, I had a job. I was sitting on the 9th floor with all these older ladies who were the secretaries to these executive gentlemen. And here I was, this young 20-something girl I was writing for the Employee magazine. He gave me stuff to do to give me my credits, but yeah, I was doing.
Wow. What a great way to learn.
Oh yeah. I mean, I did everything. My gosh. I remember at that job, I wrote a speech for Tom Sherlock, who was the president of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. He had to give a speech at some women's club about the healthcare system in Spain. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But I got to go to the University of Maryland library and do the research. And I just thought, oh my gosh, who has this opportunity at this age to write a speech for the president of a company?
Right.
So then I started doing every job. When somebody would leave, like the Employee magazine person left and went to another job. And I said, ooh, let me do it for a while. So I did it for a month or however long it took them to find another person for that job. And they would always say to me, don't you want this job? And I'm like, no, I don't want that job. I want to do the next thing. So who's leaving next? I'll do their job. And I literally did every single job in that department until finally they were like, you have to pick something.
Right.
So I ended up being the audio-visual person. I was really into video at that time and the multimedia slideshows. Well, you know about all that. And so that's what I was doing. I was doing all the audio-visual things for we did a slideshow on the history of Blue Cross, and we did one for the United Way campaign. And then I did a video to raise money for the Care First Foundation that was to help pay for kids, medical care. So that was really kind of my niche. I really liked that.
Yeah, and then you were able to transition into the banking world doing PR?
Yeah, there were some leadership changes at Blue Cross, and I applied for the job at the bank, not ever dreaming that I would get it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, they hired me. I had 2 interviews, and they hired me, and I kept saying, I don't know banking. I don't know anything about it. And they're like, don't worry about it. You'll pick it up. You'll learn. So I hated doing the budget. We had to balance the budget to the penny every month.
Wow.
in the PR department. That was the bane of my
Right.
But the other stuff I loved, writing for the, pretty much anything. Press releases I helped with. They were public at the time, the bank, so I helped get all the votes in for the proxies for the shareholders, and I learned a lot about IR, which I didn't know anything about.
Right, investor relations, right?
Yeah. So that was very helpful. And then I moved over to the internal communications. I was working out of HR for a while, and I did a lot of video when I was there because they had a video.
That's what I remember, was a lot of video.
Yeah, a lot of video. They had a video studio. We did the quarterly magazine, and I wrote and produced all that stuff and was a lot on camera. I produced the employee recognition event every year, like 1,500 people, speakers, laser shows, video walls.
Yep.
Whatever.
Your dream job.
It really was. It was a whole lot of fun. And it was very rewarding because people really enjoyed the stuff. They really enjoyed the videos. They really enjoyed the events. And that was really good. I mean, about 5 or 6 years of really good stuff. But, I wanted more. I wanted to move up. I was kind of outgrowing the job, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And here's the universe talking to you, okay? So I had applied for this job at a telecom startup. And I always thought telecom was a very sexy field. I wanted to learn that. Right. I knew nothing, but I wanted to learn. So I applied for this job, and I found out that a colleague of ours, you may know her, Connie Whittington. You know Connie? Mm-mm. Anyway, she got the job, and I was really bummed. I was just devastated. I thought, this would have been so perfect, and now here I am. I'm stuck at the bank. I can't get out. So about 2 months go by, and all of a sudden I get this call from the HR person at this saying, "Are you still interested in this job?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but I thought you hired somebody." And she goes, "Well, that didn't work out." I said, "So yes, I'm still interested." She goes, "Well, come in, have a meeting with Steve, blah, blah, blah." So in the meantime, I called Connie because I knew her. And I'm like, "Connie, what happened? What's going on?" She goes, "Oh, you don't want to work there." I'm like, "Really?" "Yes, I do." She goes, No, you don't want to work there. And so she told me some things, and I thought, I kind of thought it was nice of her. She gave me all the inside scoop and told me what to watch out for, and it was very helpful in me getting the job. But the things that she was concerned about, I had already dealt with in corporate. She was always an agency person. Mm-hmm. Agencies, totally different. You probably know.
Yes.
It's not the same internal corporate politics and all that stuff. And I was very good at that, as you probably remember from the bank. I mean, it was cool with me. Everything she told me that was worrisome for her didn't bother me a bit. So I ended up getting the job when somebody else had already had it. Mm-hmm. So, luck to me is the universe telling you that you're on the right path. Something is going right. So I stayed there for a couple years, and then actually the bank called me to come back. They were going through a merger with Dauphin up in Pennsylvania, and they called me. The senior VP called me, and I knew it wasn't really her because even though we were friends, she wasn't like that close with me or anything. Mm-hmm. So I knew something else was going on. So I made a few more calls. Knowing people is very helpful. And I found out that it was actually Frank Bramble who wanted me to come back. So I met with Frank, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "The merger and this and that, and I need you, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Fine, I've got a couple things. I don't want to work with this person. I don't want to do this. And I kind of laid out he's like, whatever you want, it's fine. And I went back. It was kind of like, whatever you want, easy. So that was good. Got through the merger. And then a guy I had worked with on the annual report one year, he called me and he said, a headhunter called me about this job over in DC. And I think he said, I told him I was not the person they were looking for, but I knew exactly who was. And he goes, I think it's you. And I said, well, I'm certainly willing to talk. I wasn't really looking to leave the bank, but I went and met with the headhunter, and it was pretty cool, pretty good job. So I went to 3 or 4 interviews. They said, she's great, just don't give her any coffee. I was a little high strung for them, I think, with the coffee. But once I cut to decaf, everything was fine. So, not really wanting to leave the bank, but the timing was good because after I left, they had a lot of problems. They had the scandal with the trader and, different president, and it just, then they got bought. And so it worked out fine. And everything was great at AFP until
until it wasn't.
Yeah, until it wasn't. Yeah, I had asked for more responsibility, which is my nature to do. They gave me everything I wanted, and then they turned around and gave me marketing when the VP of marketing quit. And it was a lot of pressure, a lot of work, and I was a perfectionist. And I remember telling my boss, he kept saying, why are you taking we did a bi-monthly magazine, about 100 and some pages.
Wow.
Yeah. And he says, why are you taking the magazine home with you to edit it? This is not, you have a director of magazine. Why don't you let them do their job? I said, well, because every time I take it home and edit it, I find problems. I find issues. I find typos. I find stuff that nobody else finds. He goes, that's not your job. I said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. I will stop doing that. But if there's any problem going forward, you go see that person. Don't come to my office and say, this is your responsibility, because I'm relinquishing that responsibility to this person. So if there's an issue, go see her. The first month that I didn't proof the magazine, there was a typo on the cover. Hello, on the cover. So when he walked into my office, I went, nope, talk to the hand, go to her. I didn't proof it. So see, that's the way it is. And it just was too much. I couldn't make everything be perfect. And my body was rejecting, I was under too much stress. And I had done some silly things, got Botox for my 25-year class reunion, and ended up eating some bad seafood. And I got really, really sick. I was at work one day and I just felt like my head was going to blow off. I was hot. My heart was racing. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I said, look, I got to go home. I'm sick. I never went back. I ended up in bed, can't eat, can't sleep, can't function, can't drive, I couldn't do anything for 3 months. So my body was like, this is it. You're done. My dream job, my great staff, my corner office, my everything I wanted, gone, just like that. Boom.
It was like the universe had to call a timeout.
Yes, because I wouldn't have quit. No matter what kind of challenge. I mean, if it hadn't been so bad,
yes,
there's no way I would have quit on my own. I just would not have. I worked too hard to get there.
So how did you dig yourself back out and because today you're vibrant, you're healthy,
I go to yoga. Yeah, I ride my bike. I climb mountains out here in Scottsdale. I do pretty much whatever I want, as long as I don't overdo it day after day after day. I do have to watch myself and take a down day every once in a while, which that was not in my vocabulary back then. So I went to all these doctors who knew nothing and said, here, take these antidepressants, go on a vacation, you'll be fine. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? You people don't know what you're doing. So I went the alternative route. I read every book on chronic fatigue. I cobbled together my own supplements. I changed all of my body care products to natural. I went to a chiropractor. I went to a homeopath. I went to a naturopath. And I went to a clinic in Pennsylvania that specializes in exactly what happened to me. And they had been doing it since the late 1950s. This doctor, I don't know, his name was Posnecker. He's passed now, but he really was trying to help mostly women, because that kind of illness mostly affects women. And he was dedicated. He had a whole clinic set up. It was all nonprofit. They treat people that can't afford to be treated. They provide all supplements, no prescription drugs unless you have a life-threatening illness. And they help you to rebuild your adrenal capacity. What happened to me was sort of like, think about a circuit breaker that blew a fuse. My adrenals blew a fuse. And they will come back. It's like your liver, your liver will regenerate if you take good care of it and support it and rebuild it. But it takes a long time. And I was, better after 3 months, but I couldn't go back to work. My brain was still foggy. I was shaking like a leaf. I couldn't eat anything. It was really, really the hardest thing I've ever done.
And so much of your identity was wrapped up in that.
All of it. All of my identity was wrapped up in my job. All of it. I didn't know who I was without that job, because striving my whole life was my whole life. Striving. How can I get the next job? How can I be better? I was the first one in my family to go to college. I was the first one to make any money at all, really.
Right.
And my grandmother depended on my help, and I was like, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh. I had just built this house out here in Scottsdale, which was going to be our vacation house, but we were like, we're going to pay for it while we're both working. Mm-hmm. It was very stressful, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And the thought of not being able to go back to work just destroyed me emotionally.
Right. Right. But then you were able to create your own enterprise as an independent. And
when I started feeling better, I jumped out there and started talking to people that I knew. That I said, look, I'm going crazy. I've got to do something. Mm-hmm. Can't work full time anymore, so I've got to do something on my own. Well, every client that I had in the first 2-3 years of being out on my own was all word of mouth. I didn't market at all, like nothing.
Well, you have a great reputation in the marketplace here in the DMV. I mean, people who are in the business community know who you are. They know your reputation. They know the quality of your work. So it wasn't all for naught. It wasn't all for naught.
Yeah. And people that had worked for me, I mean, some of them had moved on to other jobs. Mm-hmm. I got 2 or 3 different clients, long-term, 2, 3, 4, 5-year clients, from them saying, you need help with this. I know the right person.
Right.
And them saying, this was my boss. She's great. She can do this, that, and the other. And that was very helpful.
Right. So in 2017, you actually published your first book, Small Town Scandal, A Real Life Love Lesson. So I want to know more about that. I haven't read it yet, but you have that. And then you also have your children's book, Kitty Girl and Mr. Squirrel, Rescued and Homed, that came out in August. So let's talk about the first book.
Well, Small Town Scandal, the old adage, write what you know. Yep. So I've had this book in me, not on the page, but in my head and in my heart for many, many years. I had an experience when I was a teenager. At 14, a friend of my stepfather's moved in across the street from me. And he was married with a 6-year-old child. He was 32. And we had an affair that turned into him becoming my first husband. And it was, Easton. So it was, a town of 8 or 9,000 people, and everybody knows everybody, and it was quite the gossip, when everybody found out. I mean, it went on for, about a year and a half, a little bit more than a year and a half, under wraps.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then nobody could track you. There were no cell phones or anything. If you said you were going somewhere, people just believed you.
Right.
So that was scary and fun and all the things, my sexual awakening, and then the consequences of that and the fallout from that. And then the continuing, I mean, he just would not let it go. They ran him out of town, and he still kept in touch with me. He would write letters and send them to my friend's house, and he would call me sometimes when my mother wasn't home. And when I was 18, he sent me a plane ticket to come to see him in California. So I told my mother I was going to Florida with a bunch of girls, spring break, and I actually went to California on an airplane. So
sounds like a movie.
Well, I'm hoping. Your lips to God's ears, maybe. It's certainly a Lifetime movie, if nothing else.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it's sort of chronicles the whole arc of my relationship with this man who's now deceased.
Mm-hmm.
And how I sort of navigated my way through his relationship and my subsequent marriages, and how I got through it all, and the things that happened to me, and you just wouldn't believe it. Some of the stuff. There's a section in my book. I won't read it, but I'll just summarize. My grandmother had a house she owned on the Eastern Shore since 1968. I had a key on my key ring. I always had a key to my grandmother's house because it was like my house. I mean, I could come and go whenever I felt like it. I lived with her for a while. And one day when this man and I were divorced, he was living in a separate apartment. He was actually in the hospital, and he had some things that belonged to me that he wouldn't give back to me. So I drove out to Cockeysville, and I don't know what possessed me. I knew I didn't have a key to his house. I knew I couldn't get in, but I just wanted to go, and I just, something said go, do that. So I went, and I thought, I'm going to try my key ring. So I just started trying keys in the door, figuring nothing's going to happen. I took my grandmother's key. I put it in the door, and I turned the lock, and it opened the door to his apartment.
What?
Yeah. And get this, his birthday and my grandmother's birthday, same day. I kid you not.
Wow.
It blew my mind. And blew his mind too, because when he came home from the hospital, the stereo I took belonged to him was gone. And there was no sign of forced entry. He had no idea.
Wow.
But I mean, that kind of thing says, there's something to this. If you trust your intuition, trust your gut, if you come up against too many obstacles, that's not the path you're supposed to be on. Right. So that's Small Town Scandal. I finally lost a bunch of clients during the recession, as many people did. And I had a lot of time on my hands. So I said, you know what? This is it. This is the time I'm going to get this down on paper. So I had my first draft done 2009, 2010. I was polishing it a little bit, 2011. And then, my husband had some challenges. We changed jobs, we moved, blah, 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 I got busy. And then I started doing webinars on like self-publishing, because I had sent out a few queries about the book. I got a lot of good feedback, but, it's just kind of niche because it's a memoir. It doesn't really fit with our marketing, blah, blah, blah. Right. And I thought, I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm getting this thing out. So I learned from scratch, from nothing. I did research on self-publishers. From my background, I knew a lot about the cover design and what the inside should look like. And I mean, I knew if the self-publisher was doing it wrong, that I could fix it.
Right.
So that was very helpful.
Right. Right.
And it was great. I used all my PR tools. I said, I'm going to put together a media kit with press release and a sales sheet and background on me and the book. And I just targeted, there was a bookstore in Easton and a bookstore, the Greetings and Readings in Baltimore. And I sent the kits out, and a couple weeks later I called and followed up, just like I was pitching the media.
Yep.
And I said, hey, you know, I've got this book. I'm very well known in the area. I'm going to do a marketing campaign. I sent out personal snail mail invitations to people to come to my book signings. I did press releases. I got in the paper. I did social media. Everything that I learned in PR, I just used it on me instead of somebody else.
Right.
And it worked out. I mean, my book really did well for the first time out of the gate. You know, I sold, I guess, about 750 copies or something.
That's awesome.
In the first 6 months.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was surprising even to me. You know, I was selling books to people when I was driving up to Maryland to go to my book signings. I stopped into, I don't know, it was one of these steakhouses, like a Texas Roadhouse or something like that, to have dinner, because I was spending the night to drive the next day. And I was talking to these people at the bar, because, you know, when you're by yourself traveling, you eat at the bar. And these guys were like, what are you doing here by yourself? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, I'm a writer. I'm going to my book signing. Oh, what's your book? Let me see it. You know, I sold 4 books at the bar, just talking to people.
Yep. Yep. Well, you know, a book is like the best business card you can ever have, because so many people say and aspire to be published authors, but then they never do it. They have these stories, but to get your butt in the chair and actually write is hard, for one thing, even if you are a writer, because you've got those blocks. I was wondering, was there any kind of shame around actually putting it out into the world? I mean, it's one thing to have this story, but then you're really making yourself vulnerable in your memoir by saying, hey, I was this 14-year-old, I had an affair with a 32-year-old man. And, you know, to really put that out there, did you have to process like a lot of those emotions that, hey, I'm really going to it's going to be out there?
Yeah, I did. I was actually terrified, because I was afraid I was going to get sued, because some of the people in the book are still alive.
Right.
And, you know, if they think, especially people, and I mean, no offense to the Eastern Shore, but many of the people that I knew didn't have much money. Mm-hmm. And so if they thought that I was making money,
right,
they could get some of it. You know, you never know what people are thinking or what they're going to do. So that was really the scariest thing for me. Mm-hmm. As far as telling my story, I mean, most people who know me very well, I mean, you could talk to any of my close friends, they all know the whole story. Because I'm pretty much an open book when it comes to that. It's like, yeah, I did it. It's over. So what? I'm moving on. You know, I don't hold on to that so much. Right. And nowadays, my gosh, it seemed like a big scandal back in the day, but now it's kind of tame compared to what goes on in the world. Truly. So that part wasn't, but the suing part, yeah. I actually had dinner with an attorney in Chicago, and we were talking about this, and I asked him, I said, what's your advice? I mean, you're an attorney. What do you think? And he said, right on cue, here's my cat. He said, change the names. He's like, if you just change the names, he's like, anybody that knows you will know who you're talking about, but if you don't use the real names, you'll be fine. And once he told me that, then that was like permission. I could say, okay, yes, I'll be okay.
Right.
And so, I did send a copy to the ex-wife of the man who is still alive. And I wrote her a nice letter, and I said, you know, I'm going to publish this book. I just want you to know. Right. And he goes, oh, honey, that was 40 years ago. Who cares?
So she's moved on.
And then with the Kitty Girl book, oh, I was going to say, there goes my cat. She, I had a cat that I had for 16 years, and she was everything to me. And she got liver disease, and she got sick, and I had to put her down, and I was beside myself. I was just a wreck. If you ever had to put an animal down, it's
hard. It's
the hardest thing to do in the world, because it just rips your heart out, because you love them, but you want them to not suffer, you know?
Right.
So I did that, and I lived without an animal, which I haven't done in years and years and years. Since probably college was the last time I didn't have an animal. And I just couldn't do it. After about 3 months, I said to my husband, I got to get another cat because I'm just bereft here. I don't know what to do with myself. So I had always gotten my animals either from a friend or from like this one that I love that I had to put down, I got from my vet. I'd never been to an actual shelter to go adopt a pet. So I went online to the Pet Finder app, and I'm looking and I'm scrolling through, and it's like Tinder, nope, 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 nope. And then I finally saw this little kitten, and her picture just touched me. Mm-hmm. And the next morning I called, I said, I'm looking at pet number, whatever it is, right, and whatever her name was. And they said, yep, she's still here. She's a baby. She's in the back trailer, whatever. I said, I'll be there tomorrow. I get in my car. I drive to downtown Atlanta because I was in Atlanta at the time for just a minute, but that's a whole nother story. And I go to this shelter, and it is horrendous. They have so many animals and not enough room to house them. And the place is noisy and stinky. And, it just was not a good place to be. So I picked up this little kitten, and she melted me. That was it. I was like, yep. They're like, please take her, because if she stays here, she'll get sick.
Right.
And the whole experience was just new to me, which is, at my age, I have a new experience like that is not easy to do. So just raising this little kitten that I hadn't done in 16 or something years, I just said, I got to write about this. And she has this little stuffed squirrel. I don't know where he is, but she's got this little brown stuffed squirrel that ever since she was a baby, she carries him around with her, and she meows and she talks to him and takes him up into the condo with her. And she's just, if you lose Mr. Squirrel, you're in big trouble. I mean, this is like her security blanket. It's like Linus with his blanket,
Right, right.
So I wrote this story all about her. And there again, I used my PR skills, and I sent an email to the PR chick at the Phoenix School of Art. And I said, I've got this children's book I'm writing. I need a good illustrator. I'm willing to pay X amount of dollars. I need this many black and white illustrations and then a cover one in color. Could you please put this out here to your art students and see if somebody would like to do this? Because it'd be great for their portfolio and yada, yada, yada. And next thing you know, I got 3 people coming and sending me samples of their art and saying, yep, I want to do it. Here's my sample. And I picked this great girl named Dina Kelly, and she just does the cutest little illustrations that you ever want to see. I mean, how cute is that cover?
Oh, that's really cute.
That's my Violet, and that's Mr. Squirrel.
That's great.
And it's worked out so well that I'm doing a sequel.
Nice.
The girl, Mr. Squirrel, Lost and Found, where she gets lost and she gets found through the help of her microchip. So a lot of this book is kind of teachy in that it helps, the story kind of helps go through what it takes to raise a kitten and what you have to go through bathing them and taking them to the vet and getting them spayed and all that kind of stuff, that if a child says, Mommy, I want a cat, or Mommy, I want a dog, you can read this book to them so that they understand the responsibilities that come along with owning a pet. And then I've donated some of the books to the Talbot Humane Society shelter to give out when they adopt out a cat. So I also sent one, this is my Hail Mary here. I sent one to the president of PetSmart Charities, hoping that I can get them put into PetSmart's adoption kits. So we'll see. Haven't heard back from him yet.
But brilliant PR move. Brilliant PR move. That's fantastic. Yeah, because the marketplace is different for memoirs versus children's books.
Yes,
PR exactly. Is PR, and pitching is pitching, and being strategic and knowing who your audience is. I think that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah.
So I'm also working on another serious book. My girlfriend from college, her mother in the 80s was murdered in Greenville, South Carolina. And of course, back then there wasn't social media and there wasn't internet or anything. So everything was just reported in the paper. And her sister-in-law kept a scrapbook of like all of the newspaper clippings about it, all of the police reports, the autopsy, the killer's confession. I have a copy of all that stuff. So I'm actually writing a true crime murder book for my next serious effort based on the real true crime of her mother's murder.
And it hasn't been written about in a book.
No.
So this will be the first book about
It's only been, reported in the newspaper, and some of the stuff they didn't even, like a lot of the details of what happened was not, it was all, newspaper reporting was just the facts, here's what happened, here's the guy, blah, 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 here's where we caught him. But all the sort of the backstory and how the murder happened and how the relationship of the two people. And
was it somebody that knew her that murdered her?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It was. Oh. Wow. Well, I can't wait till that one comes out. All three of them are amazing. That's just great. So my finale question is always, what's the bravest thing that you've ever done, and how does it inspire you today?
I have to go back to, getting over my illness, because I know this sounds crazy, but it never occurred to me that I would ever be not strong and not capable and not able to work. I was always such an Energizer bunny, and I could do everything. I used to ride 30-mile bike rides with my husband on the weekends, and I played competitive tennis at the bank. I don't know if you remember that. And I worked 10-hour days, and I took care of my family, and I took care of my yard, and I just always had abundance of energy. I very rarely got tired. I never really took a sick day much or anything. So the idea that I would be physically and emotionally incapacitated for any reason just never crossed my mind.
Right.
And for it to hit me so hard all at once and really change my entire life.
Yes.
To a life that I never thought I would ever live.
Mm-hmm.
It took me longer, I think, to wrap my head around that than to actually heal my body.
Right.
My body was healed much before my head was healed. And I worked with a lady, too, who was sort of an intuitive healer. Mm-hmm. And she helped me through a lot of these blocks and the trauma of the illness and everything, and trying to help me let that other life go.
Right.
And now the thought of actually going back to a full-time work in the office job, mm-hmm. I just can't even fathom that. Right. I guess if the right thing absolutely came along, I would have to consider it. But in my gut, I know it's not the right thing, and that I'm on the right path now with the books, and I can feel it. It just feels right. When you're in that sort of river of flow, you can feel it. And that has been the hardest thing for me to accept, I guess, emotionally and mentally, that I'm not this corporate powerhouse person that I thought that I was going to grow up to be.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for sharing, because I think the universe does let you know, and sometimes it has to hit you over the head with a sledgehammer and really beat you down. And I think, we both know what life is like in corporate communications, and the pace and it's just gotten worse. It's not any better than 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It's just the expectations. It's just not physically, humanly possible to go at that pace. And
many people in our field, and I do too, and the number of them that have had major health issues because of their stress of their jobs, it's mind-boggling to me how many. And it's not good.
Well, and in a lot of ways, we're all kind of cut from the same cloth in terms of our work ethic, in terms of putting our self-care second. wanting to really, be in support of the organization and the mission. And really, we know how critical the function is to advancing, whether it be sales or employee engagement or, brand reputation in the marketplace. So we know, even though we're the one behind the executives, we're the ones pulling all the levers and making all this stuff happen. And that's where we get our satisfaction, not being the one that's out front, right? But we know, oh yeah, I was the one that produced that, or I was the one that wrote that, or everybody's raving about this or that. And you're the one that put it all together. And you don't need the credit. That's not really our style. So I think that the profession, the people who really excel in it, it attracts a certain type of person, I think.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us are, prone to be kind of perfectionistic. We want everything to be really as the best it can possibly be.
Yes.
And that can drive you a little nuts too. Sometimes.
Yes. Having everything buttoned up and, so I think that's just in our nature. But I really appreciate you coming on the show. Where can people find your books? Are they available on Amazon? Or?
Yes, both books are available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And then at my own website, which is www.resiamedia.com, RESIAMEDIA.com. If you order the books there, especially the Kitty Girl book, you get free coloring pages for your kids to color in the little illustrations. So that's a little bonus you get, and free shipping on my website too. But yeah, you can get them on either ebooks, Kindle, the Barnes and Noble one, whatever that is. I forget what one's called, but so both.
Okay. Well, and we'll make sure that we put those in the show notes as links so people can click right over to it and they can read all about Small Town Scandal and Kitty Girl and Mr. Squirrel. So,
well, thank you so much, Tracy. It's been fun connecting again.
Definitely.
And I love your podcast. I've listened to several of the other ones. I'm going to give you a shout out here and tell your listeners, check out the other podcasts, because there's some very interesting women that you've interviewed, and they have some great perspectives as well.
They really do. And I'm really trying to just share their stories with the world, because I think, the world needs more positive, inspiring, and motivating women telling their stories, as well as helping women understand that this too shall pass.
I totally agree with that. And it'll be better. And, just push through it, but don't push too hard. That's the best thing I can say.
That's good.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Brave Girls with Tracy M. as much as I did creating it. Each show is produced with you, the listener, in mind, as you look for inspiration and motivation from other brave souls as you pursue your desires. I'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave me a review on iTunes. I read every one. And check out my website, tracym.com, for more free resources. You can also join my list and sign up for my newsletter right from the homepage. Until next time, stay strong, believe in your dreams, and go do something brave.
We appreciate you joining us for this episode of Brave Girls with Tracy M, and hope that you enjoyed the show. For more information about today's episode, as well as additional free resources to help you achieve greatness in your life, visit tracym.com and sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, dream big, believe in yourself, and let your brilliance shine as only you can do.